Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who are just joining us and did not join us last time, we want to welcome you. And for those of you who are joining us again, welcome back. This is the second in a three-part series on graduate school admissions and the process. So the first session that we did was 2 weeks ago, and that was about preparing for graduate school. And this particular session is focused on deciding to apply to graduate school and also the steps and the pieces of the application process. So a couple things that I want to mention before we get started. One is that soon you're going to see contact information for all of the folks that are going to be presenting today so that you can contact people afterward if you have any additional questions that you forget to ask in the breakout rooms. The second thing I want to note is that we will have a Q&A session before we go into the breakout rooms if you have general questions about any of the things that we talk about or something else. So you should feel free to put that in the chat, and then we'll circle back to it at the end of the panel series or the panel session. And then the last thing I want to mention is a little bit of housekeeping, and just to kind of help us out a little bit. If you can take a moment to change your name, that would help a lot. So you're going to change your name to just your first name and the first initial of your last name, and then the breakout session that you'd like to go to. And one thing I should mention about the breakout sessions is that you should go to the breakout session that you are interested in pursuing for graduate school. So just because you're a psychology major right now does not mean that you need to go to the psychology room. If you're interested in sociology or some other field, go to that breakout room. So the breakout rooms are in the chat. So in my case, for example, I would change my name to Carla M. Psych, and you can all do the same based on your own desires wherever you want to be placed for the breakout sessions. So by doing that, it'll help us sort everyone, and we can get everyone into the breakout rooms later very quickly. So thank you so much. So tonight, what we want to talk about, as I mentioned, is deciding to apply to graduate school, and then all of the many different processes that happen around actually applying to graduate school. And there are lots of things to consider in that process, and our presenters are going to help you to understand what those things are. So I want to introduce those folks first so that you have an idea of who they are, and they'll wave or give some indication of who they are. So the first is Dr. Elizabeth Alsop, and Dr. Alsop is Assistant Professor and Academic Director of Communication and Media and Liberal Studies at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. Next is Dr. Mariette Bates. Dr. Bates is a Distinguished Lecturer and Academic Director of Disability Studies Programs at SPS. Dr. Sarah Zeller-Berkman. Dr. Zeller-Berkman is the Academic Director of the Youth Studies Program at CUNY SPS and the Director of the Intergenerational Change Initiative at the JFK Junior Institute for Worker Education. Dr. Margaret Riley. Dr. Riley is Professor and Academic Director of the Nursing Program at CUNY SPS. Dr. Isabel Alicia. Dr. Alicia is a Distinguished Lecturer and Associate Director for the Psychology Program. Ellen Carl. Ellen Carl is a Distinguished Lecturer and Academic Director for the Health Information Management Programs. Dr. Tara Barca. Dr. Barca is a Lecturer and Assistant Academic Director for the Business Programs at CUNY SPS. And Dr. Melanie Lorak. And Dr. Lorak is Assistant Professor and Associate Academic Director of Sociology and Human Relations at CUNY SPS. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? We decided for this session to put the questions up so that you can kind of follow along, and it can kind of keep us on target. So the first thing we want to talk about is graduate school. So before you can apply to graduate school, you really have to decide that you want to attend graduate school. So even if you attended our panel 2 weeks ago about preparing for graduate school, making the actual leap to applying is going to take a lot of thought on your part, and you're going to be spending money and time and a lot of emotional resources and intellectual resources in your program. So you want to make sure that it's the right decision for you. So it might be a good idea for you to know what graduate school actually entails. So Dr. Lorick, would you like to start with what will graduate school entail? What's it really like?
Melanie, I think you're muted.
Yeah, all right, let me start again. All right. So it's somewhat intense in the sense that, as you just pointed out, there's a lot of financial and emotional resources going into it. When you do your MA, you typically invest about 2 years of your time. When you go for your doctorate, you might invest between, I don't know, 5 and 10 or 12 years of time and resources. So when I think about what it entails, it means for the masters that you are going to continue with coursework somewhat close to what you've done in your undergraduate, but will have a more specialized and a more sort of professionalized, curriculum or coursework. And for the PhD, that is true too, but for the PhD, there's much more of a research component. The other part of it is that you will have an opportunity for social networking, which I think is really important for graduate school, for both a master's and the doctorate. So there is a feeling of being a part of a group, being part of a cohort, going through this together and moving towards, your professional field.
Anyone else want to add anything to that?
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Margaret Riley from the SPS nursing program. I think Melanie's points are well taken. I also think when someone approaches the idea of graduate school and what does it entail, an important component is making sure that you have the time to devote to it because it is a commitment, an ongoing commitment until you reach the degree award. And every semester, you will have to allocate time and invest yourself in order to be able to complete the assignments, tasks, and the engagement that is all part of graduate level learning.
Hi, I'm Mariette Bates, and I'm the academic director of the Disability Studies program. When you're in a bachelor's program, you're taking a variety of different courses, history and math and science and some other courses that might be in your major. And you need to, so it's a very broad look, right? A liberal arts education, involves. But in graduate school, this is really in one subject. So you're kind of throwing your head in a certain direction, and it's not as broad. You're studying a subject in more depth in graduate school. So even though you might be taking a variety of topics that are, that are not all the same, topics, they're the subject you're studying in more depth rather than a broad look at a variety of different subjects. So you need to prepare for that and just know what it is that you're kind of getting yourself into.
Yeah, and just to add quickly to what Dr. Bates just said, as you start to specialize and master this particular area or field of study, there's also the expectation that you are going to kind of intervene in the scholarly conversation, so that this is at the doctoral level, that you're going to develop your own independent research questions that you'll kind of pursue throughout the doctorate. And that really, is something that will culminate in the dissertation, but you ideally start doing that in your coursework and in your exams preceding the dissertation. So, I think there's a shift often from that, especially in the undergraduate years, where you're often responding to prompts that your professor is giving you, to becoming a graduate student and really needing to identify for yourself what your research interests and questions are, and kind of taking more agency of that process.
And I think that's where you see the difference with time commitments too. So Dr. Lorick mentioned that it can be 5 years, it can be 10 to 12 years. And some of you probably thought, what is the 12 years so I can move away from that? But it really can be any subject, because if you spend years and years on your dissertation, years and years on your exams, the time adds up very quickly. So let's say that you've decided, you're certain that you want to go to graduate school, and you're deciding whether or not it's going to be a master's program or a PhD program, or some other type of graduate study. Where do you go next is usually where students find themselves trying to figure out, well, how do I choose a school? How do I choose a program? And how many should I choose is often a question that we get. So why don't we put this toward, let's see. Dr. Alicia, do you want to talk about how one would choose a school or a program, and how many programs one should choose?
First, yes, I think the first question concerns whether you're willing to move. If you are willing to move, you have more opportunities that are available to you. New York is a very competitive city. I said this last time. New York is one of those cities where, because everyone wants to be here, there are limited spaces and they don't necessarily provide you with as many resources as you might have in other cities. So really it's about figuring out what your flexibility is in terms of your personal life situation and the life decisions that you can make. Sometimes you have personal commitments, relationships, that keep you in a particular geographic location. And so that may limit the scope of your search for a program. But if you're someone who has a lot of flexibility, and even if you have a little less flexibility, one way to start is to think about what you're interested in topic-wise. So if there's a particular area of research that you're very interested in, take a look to see where the researchers who do the kind of work you're interested in actually are. So let's say, for example, if you are someone who is absolutely fascinated by work on cultural historical activities theory in developmental psychology, then you would take a look to see where the top people who do that type of work are. And you would figure out, reading their work, that's the first thing, contacting them and introducing yourself, telling them you're very interested in their work, and asking them, for example, if they are interested, if they are currently accepting students for the upcoming years. Also, sometimes that information is available on the website for the program. So take a look at the program websites and really identify a couple of people whom you would work with. So let's say if you go to a particular school, I started off the PhD program in human development at Cornell. I went there to work with a really well-known developmentalist who's a historian. And when I got there, I quickly realized that she was not someone I wanted to necessarily work with for 5 years. So I worked on a small project with her, and then I ended up choosing someone else. And luckily for me, I'd already identified 3 different people at that program whom I was interested in working with before I got there. So it's really picking the program, the people to work with, which might determine which program you select, and keeping in mind that in graduate school, especially at the PhD level, you're pretty much married to your mentor. Once you pick someone to work with, you stay with that person during that time. Sometimes your funding is dependent on your work with that person. At the master's level, you have way more flexibility in that the expectation is not that you're staying with this person, but that you're taking the required courses and that maybe you'll form a mentorship relationship, maybe you won't form that same relationship. But really it's about deciding first what you're doing graduate study wise, PhD or master's, and then identifying where there are people who do work you're interested in.
And I just want to add a couple of things. One thing is that I think it's really important, I think we will talk about fit a little bit later too, that the program you choose is supporting you in achieving your goals. And I was, kind of entering grad school, I always thought about this kind of team Melanie, like who can be there to get me where I want to be. And I also think that in terms of, and I think there are different approaches to it, but in terms of choosing how many programs to apply to, I think less is more. I think some people might disagree, but I think it's important to prepare an individualized, tailored statement. And so the less programs or the pickier you are in, programs that will really make a difference in your life, the more time you can spend preparing those statements and the more you can increase the likelihood of being accepted into the program. And so, yeah, think about not just sort of, are they going to take me, but think about how can they help me? How can they be there for me?
This is Marge Riley from the nursing program. I think also when you look at specialty professions like nursing or health information management, for example, you also need to consider, as was said early, what is the specialty that you want to dive into, so to speak? And that can help guide your selection of a school. Do you want to become a nurse anesthetist? Do you want to become a nurse informaticist? Do you want to become a nurse practitioner in the acute care setting, or do you want to become a pediatric nurse practitioner or a women's health nurse practitioner? So those are all questions you need to think through and ask yourself. Where are the programs that have these tracks that I could apply to? And in some cases, that may mean relocating to different parts of the state or different parts of the country in order to take advantage of opportunities for admission to these specialized professions.
Yeah, I would just add also specific to kind of doctoral programs, and to Dr. Lork's point about sort of thinking strategically about how the program can help you. If you are pursuing a doctorate with the goal of teaching at the college level, again, given, as I mentioned last week, the kind of incredible contraction of that market, it's good to look at things like placement, right? So how have their students fared after they receive their degrees? What kinds of work are they doing? Are they finding full-time employment? And, of course, that really, I think, could apply to almost any graduate program. At a certain point, once you were to get admitted, you can also kind of do additional research in that vein by reaching out. Sometimes people will connect you with current students in the program who can tell you about kind of the culture of the program, give you some more, kind of detail about its ins and outs. But I think it is good to look at what outcomes students are having, and programs should be willing to share that information with you as a prospective student.
I also want to just mention a little, tip for students when you're thinking about how many schools to apply to. Most of them have admissions application fees that you want to consider as well. They can get pretty pricey. Some of them can be $125, $150. Some of them will waive their fees. So you want to kind of look into that and just factor that in when you're thinking about the number of schools. Rather than casting a huge wide net, you might decide that maybe you don't want to spend all of that money doing that and you want to tailor it a little more. Anyone else want to add anything to that? So what if you have decided on the schools and you run across what may likely happen is that the school that you're applying to has pre-admission courses that are required before you can actually enter the program, or in some cases before you can actually apply. So what should you do in that case? So Ellen, Carl, do you want to talk a little bit about pre-admission courses?
Sure, be happy to. I can speak specifically about our health information management program, but I know that many of the programs here at SPS do have some pre-admission courses that need to be completed, but there are also some that don't. So you're wise as you're looking at schools to make sure you understand what the requirements are. Oftentimes, for instance, in health information management, we require that students, if they don't have the pre-admission courses that they need, that they can take them during their first year as a student in our program. And I believe some of the other programs here represented here, as that's the same rule applies. So I guess I would just say, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, what you do need in order to have a complete application. Some courses may be required ahead of time. And in that case, you should make sure you understand what's required of you before you do the application. In health information management, we do have 4 pre-admission courses that we require. And if a student is coming from a background in health information management, they would have met these requirements. We do accept students who do not have a background in health information management. So typically those are the students who might not have the required pre-admission courses. I'm guessing that's somewhat similar. I can't probably say that's the case for nursing, but you're wise to do your research.
So in psychology, we have 3 pre-admission courses. We have Introduction to Psychology, we have Research Methods, and Statistics. Now, those are very similar expectations across the board in graduate school in psych. Obviously, if you're going to a PhD program, there may be other requirements. So for example, if you're doing a PhD in health psychology, you may be required to have health psychology at the undergrad level. If you're doing a PhD in developmental psychology, you may be required to have developmental at the undergraduate level. It really depends on the program. In terms of how we handle prerequisites, we do allow students to come into the program on a conditional basis. The idea being that you would start off taking the prerequisites, which you have not completed, and then after you've completed those prerequisites, you would be allowed to enter our regular graduate program, our regular master's degree program, and take other courses. But really, my suggestion is start your research early. Don't wait until a month before the application is due, but really, when you start thinking about graduate school right away, identify programs and look to see what the general expectations are. Your choice of programs may change, but typically the prerequisites in particular disciplines do not change too much from one program to another.
One thing I'd just like to add, hi everybody, Tara Barca. So one thing to look into as well is if the school offers credit for prior learning that you can earn by taking let's say a standardized exam, or sometimes submitting a portfolio showing that you already possess that learning. And like for instance, in the Master of Science in Business Management and Leadership, we have 3 prerequisites, but there are standardized exams that you could take for all 3. So it's definitely important as you're looking at the curricula for each of the programs to really dive in and look at the details and see if there are ways to earn credit for prior learning.
So at SPS, nursing has a similar policy as psychology, in that students are conditionally admitted if they have not met the undergraduate pre-admission courses. This is a similar practice to many other graduate programs in nursing throughout the New York State area, as well as across the country. It's up to you to be a smart consumer and determine what are the schools that will allow me to complete them as part of a conditional admission? What are the schools that require that I complete them before I can even apply? And then make sure that you complete and find those courses that you can get them done in order to complete the application process. So those are good questions to ask yourself. And again, part of the consumer in you in finding out all the things that you need to do before you actually do that application process.
Great, thank you. One of the areas that students often forget is about their transcripts. And there are a lot of misunderstandings about transcripts, what you need, how long it takes to get them. So Dr. Bates will talk a little bit about the transcripts, how important they are, and how you should go about this process.
Well, one of the things that, it's a great segue from the pre-admissions courses, because one of the things that people want to know when they're looking at your transcripts is whether you've taken these courses or not, right? So, or what relevant courses to the graduate program you're applying to you took when you were in your bachelor's program. One of the things that people, I think, sometimes forget is that it can take a very long time for the transcripts to come to the graduate program, particularly in the middle of this pandemic when people are working from home and there may be a delay. So one thing that you should know is that at SPS and at many other places, we require every single, hold on a second. Could you take your cane with you, please? Hold on just a second. Right in the middle of the room.
So I can talk a little bit while Dr. Bates is getting settled. Oh, okay, here she is.
Sorry, I'm back.
No problem.
Yes, one of those interruptions. So one of the things is that it can take a very long time. So you want to request them very far in advance. The other thing is that we need to see all of the transcripts from your undergraduate work that you did at any college that you went to, and also if you did graduate work. So if you went to multiple institutions, which many of our students do, it's not just enough to get the last transcripts that show you have a bachelor's degree. We need all of them. Part of that is that it's CUNY policy, and we follow CUNY policy. But also it's helpful to us in the admissions process to look at the evolution that you had as a student. Sometimes we have students who, went to a community college and you can see that in their first couple of semesters they were struggling, and then they really started to, to do better. Last week we talked about GPA, and we do look at those. It's not the most important thing, but it's something we take into account, and that's on your transcripts. But for many programs, we look at transcripts because we want to make sure that if you're applying to a program, you've taken courses that are relevant and that you've done well in them. For example, if you're applying to a business course, one of the things that people use a lot in business is numbers, right? You use statistics and so forth. So if you're applying to a business course and you failed every math course that you took as an undergraduate, you might have to make up courses and to prove that you have those skills now, because it might be really important in your graduate education. So, and similarly, if you're applying to a program where it's humanities based and you haven't done well in your humanities courses as an undergrad, that's something that that the admissions committee would want to know more about. And you would need to address it in a variety of ways, so that transcripts are important because of, those particular issues. Also, if you're a foreign student, there's information on our website about transcripts. If you went to a college or a university where English is the primary language, you would need to have the transcript evaluated by one of the companies that does that for, that's one of the things they do, because we need to be assured that you have the equivalent of an American bachelor's degree. So there are companies that they actually do look at your transcript and say, this is the equivalent of a bachelor's degree in the US. If you're in a country where English is not the first language, you would need to also have that transcript translated, because we need to, again, look at the courses that you took. And you may need to, and you would likely need to take a test of English as a foreign language, so a TOEFL exam. and achieve a certain score on that, which is also detailed on our website. That takes time. So if you're in that situation, you want to allow, 6 or 8 months to do this, because sometimes getting a transcript from another country can be a challenging process, as we know from experience. So make sure you have enough time to complete that process before you apply. We can often hold your application a little bit after the application date, but we won't hold it forever. At some point, the transcripts have to come because we really need them, and the admissions committee can't consider your application unless it's complete. So we can't look at it unless you have the transcripts. So if you're anxious to get a decision about admission, it helps to have all the documents in as soon as possible.
I just want to add one small thing, because I had a foreign transcript, a German transcript, and German universities don't do transcripts, so they didn't even know what I was talking about. And I want to second Dr. Bates' comment on giving it enough time, but also communicating. I think that's also important. Explaining to, the one institution what you need, and to the other institution, why things are maybe not there where they are. Sort of try to communicate as much as you can if you run into any obstacles with the institutions that you want things from and that you are applying to or intending to apply to.
One last point I'd just like to make quickly is about, if the admissions program doesn't provide you with a checklist, make sure you make one of your own. It will save you a lot of time and frustration later, so that you can have a guide as, step by step, and to, make notes where this is, where that is. And so that way you can go back to refer, and it will keep you sane throughout the process, because it's a lot of documentation, a lot of things to put together for each program that you apply to. So definitely keep a checklist, whether or not they provide it, create one yourself.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And even a little file on your computer. Back in the olden days, I know when I was applying to graduate school, you used to make binders for whatever you were going to be doing, and you'd lug around this huge binder with all of your documents. And luckily, you don't need to do that. You can put a nice little file folder on your desktop. So one of the areas where people often needed those binders was for the folks that they were asking for letters of recommendation. So we want to talk a little bit to you about letters of recommendation, because they are so important. So Dr. Riley, do you want to talk a little bit about those really important documents?
Sure, I'll be happy to talk about that. And I'm going to present it with the idea of an acronym called ABC BEST. So these are some strategies and things to think about when you're preparing for obtaining recommendation letters. So you need to do a little prep work first. So you want to look at your academic achievements and your GPA. Especially when you're talking about a program like nursing, where you may have gone to several different programs to finally reach the major prerequisite for applying to graduate school, which is a bachelor's degree. So you want to look at what are those academic accomplishments and achievements. Were you enrolled in graduate courses while you were in the undergraduate program? Were you successful in those? Did you do well in those? You want to be able to highlight those kinds of things. And then what is your GPA? Be familiar with it. And if it's not as strong as you would like it to be, or it doesn't quite meet the requirements, you want to be able to frame for the person you're going to ask for a recommendation. What have you done to demonstrate your academic strength since the last time that you were in school? So that's A. For B, you want to back up your request to any reference person that you seek. You want to provide them with a list of your accomplishments since you last were in school. You want to talk about your abilities. What have you done as far as earning different types of certifications or other skill sets that are pertinent to the field in which you are seeking graduate education? And then you want to talk a little bit about your alignment of your interest in the particular program for which you are going to be applying. It's a good practice to put together a copy of your resume to send to the person that you're going to ask for a reference. And on that resume, you can again comment on your qualifications and your potential for graduate school, your interest in it. So that's some prep work that's good to do before you actually reach out to people. And so that's the best part of this acronym. Best, B, begin with a list of potential references. Who are people that you might identify and reach out to provide a reference for you, a letter of recommendation for the particular program? Most people that you contact are usually willing and they want to do a good job. And so it's helpful to them to provide some information that would be useful for them in writing this letter of recommendation. So you want to endeavor to select people who know you, are familiar with you, are familiar with your work, at least in your past academic life or in your past professional life or current one. You also want to make sure that they are available to provide a reference to you. Oftentimes, students apply to a program, they make a reference request of someone who is not available. It may be a faculty person who is on annual leave, or it might be someone who is traveling or is on medical leave or just not available. And so it's important that you identify and endeavor to select people that will be available to actually provide the letter of recommendation. So the S in the best part is to start with former professors and faculty. This is an academic program that you are applying to. And so a letter of recommendation from a faculty member who worked with you, who knew you in your previous academic level is an important person who can talk about your ability to perform at the graduate level. If you have been out of school for quite some time, don't be afraid to reach back to the place where you went to school. Faculty are often there for long periods of time. They often keep records of students, and they're usually happy to assist a student who has made a decision to go to graduate school. But if you don't know anyone any longer at your former school, you can also look to professional supervisors and people who have a management position that oversees you. You don't want to use people who are your lateral colleagues. You want to use professional colleagues who are perhaps overseeing or directing you in a particular project or a particular area. And then the T part of ABC Best is do take time to contact the person that you want to write that reference for you. It's very disconcerting to receive an electronic request for a reference and the former student has never contacted me to say that they are asking a reference for me. It does take time and effort to put together a good letter of recommendation for someone. So it's just a professional approach to reach out to that person that you are going to ask for a letter of recommendation and request permission from them and request approval. It also gives you that opportunity to know if they're going to be available and have the time to be able to provide that reference. And remember, when you do reach out to them, if they are agreeable, don't forget to toot your horn a little bit. Share with them all the good things that you have accomplished since you last were engaged with them. And that's, again, where your resume, your list of accomplishments, qualifications, and why you are interested in this particular school and in this direction play a very important part in making that request for the letters of recommendation.
I'd just like to add that, just to build on what Dr. Riley said, that as a bachelor's student, now is your time to make the connections with your faculty. You know, I occasionally I've been teaching a long time, right, since 1990s, right? So I occasionally get letters or emails from people and they're asking for a letter of recommendation. And to be honest, I can't remember having them in class because when they were in class, they were like me. They never said anything. They sat in the back of the room. So they may not stand out. So now is the time, if you think you want to go to graduate school and you're not sure even, to make connections. Go to the student hours that your faculty have. Ask a question. If you don't have a question, just, make yourself available and talk about your, whatever is interesting to you, because you want the faculty member to remember you. And when we have 25 students in a classroom, sometimes that's difficult to do. It also helps if, when you're contacting the faculty person for a recommendation, if you remind them that you were in this class and you wrote a paper about this subject, because it sort of triggers memories in the faculty member's mind, so that they remember you, they remember your face, and they remember what you wrote. We often do remember more about students than you might think, but with so many students that we've taught over the years, we can't remember every single one with the same kind of intensity. So it really helps for you to reach out and remind us who you are. And as Dr. Riley said, remind us of all, tell us about all the good stuff that happened since you graduated.
Yeah, and just to build on what Dr. Bates and Dr. Riley said, I echo everything. Try to, you may have to direct your faculty member a little bit, right? Don't assume they're going to remember your deadline just because you told it to them a month ago. So don't hesitate to nudge gently, professionally, send a well-timed reminder. And in addition to, reminding them about your accomplishments, you might even share a copy of the paper you wrote in their class. Students who do that with me make my job really easy, because I can go back and say, wow, the student wrote this fascinating paper about X and they made this really great insight. And I can speak in a really specific, concrete way about what was impressive and striking and singular about their work. And I think that kind of detail helps when you're reading a lot of recommendation letters, which can all kind of blur together if they're just kind of a series of interchangeable superlatives. So, try to give your recommender details, kind of manage them as best you're able to. And this is kind of maybe something that we talk less about when you're choosing your recommender. This might go without saying, but probably don't put at the top of your list someone whose class you didn't perform as well in. I sometimes get requests from students. I've had requests from students who have plagiarized in my class, and that puts the recommender in a tricky position. I'm always honest with students. If I can't write them a letter that I feel like is going to reflect them in a good light, I tell them that. But if your performance was lackluster in the class, don't, maybe, again, just because that was someone that maybe taught you recently, think a little bit harder, and maybe choose someone who can speak to your strengths a bit more. I know that's an odd thing to say, but sometimes in the moment, in the heat of admissions, you get a little flustered and you're just looking for anyone in your kind of proverbial Rolodex to reach out to. So do take time to think carefully.
It's also a good idea to circle back to your application to see if the references in fact have been submitted. You don't always get a notification that that's been done. So you can be proactive, and if they haven't, you can, as Dr. Alsop mentioned, very professionally go back to your reference and say, kindly send the reference letter in by a particular date. Or at that point, if they haven't done it and it's time sensitive, you may want to think about identifying someone else from the list of people that you have made who could serve as writing letters of recommendation.
One quick point, and I'm not sure if this needs to be said, but don't ask an extended family member. Don't ask a friend. Make sure that somebody who really has supervised your work, and who really knows how you perform. And also when you've overcome difficulties, I think that that's a great opportunity to showcase resilience. So I think it's important to really think about your references and make sure that it's somebody who really knows you. And perhaps this relates to fit a bit, share with them a bit about the program and about the school and what excites you about the program and the school and how you think you could fit in. And then the recommender can tie that into their letter. And that adds the element of fit into the recommendation letter as well as your personal statement.
Yeah, the only thing I would want to add to that is just remember that you are asking someone to do a favor for you, right? So while we like to help you in any way that we can, sometimes with all of the things that are going on and all of the people that ask, you know, I've had people ask me to write letters of recommendation. They come in waves. So just try to be kind in the process to your faculty member. Ask them if they can do it, and if they can. A nice thing to ask that I always appreciate is a student who says, is there anything I can do to kind of make this easier for you? And all the ways that everyone has talked about are ways that would make your faculty members' life easier. And because they're doing this nice favor for you, the more you can help them, the better.
And also just keep them posted on the outcome. Sometimes you write a letter and then you never hear back and you're like, what happened? And you may need them to write you a letter the next year. So it's good to tend that relationship. So don't forget to especially let them know whatever the outcome is, but especially if it's good news. People love to hear that.
So for some graduate programs, there are other things that are needed. Exams, specific exams could be part of the package. So Dr. Alsop, can you talk a little bit about exams and where those might be appropriate?
Sure. Yeah, and the caveat is that, you know, I think this is actually sort of changing as we speak. So I want to sort of lead by just letting you know that in the past, I would say year or two, a number of schools, including, you know, very prestigious private universities like Brown, as well as public institutions, are eliminating the GRE requirement. So the GRE is the graduate record examination, and it's kind of I think the most sort of standard comprehensive exam that's meant to assess students' readiness for graduate study. And, you know, this has been a step that a lot of schools have taken or are taking in response to, you know, diversity and inclusion initiatives. It's a way many people see of removing a barrier, you know, that has historically, you know, affected historically underrepresented groups, right? Because we know that like the SAT, it's often, you know, the more that you're able to pay for test prep, the better you do on the test. So it's not necessarily the best assessment of your skills. So anyway, that's all I would say is, and I think this is something you can certainly talk more about in the breakout rooms. There might be tests that are specific to the field of study that you're looking to pursue. So of course there's the LSAT for law school and the MCAT for med school, and you know, all manner of tests. Dr. Bates already mentioned the TOEFL exam. If you're taking, in addition to the sort of standard GRE, which has 3 parts, verbal reasoning, analytical reasoning, and then or what's it called? I think it's verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, and analytical writing, which includes 2 essays. Some programs still require what's known as a subject test. So for instance, if you did want to go to get a doctorate in English, some programs will require you to do an additional GRE subject test in English in addition to the standard GRE. So what you'll want to do is, you know, as you would anyway, just scrutinize and look carefully at the program's list of admissions requirements and see what tests they require. Again, knowing there's going to be, I think, a lot of variation among programs. And so again, I would ask in your breakout rooms what tests are standard in your particular field. As with, I think Dr. Marquez Lewis referred to the fees associated with admissions, there are also fees associated with tests and exams. So that's just another thing to budget for. I think in some cases there are fee reduction programs or fee waivers, you know, so that's something to look into, but factor that into your planning as well. I think that's all I've got about exams right now. Oh, maybe one other thing I'll just say. I would say that, you know, if your transcripts kind of tell a story about your education and the way that Dr. Bates described, I don't think the GREs tell a very comprehensive story, right? So I think the day I took the GREs, I was taking, it's what the now standard form is to do a computer adaptive test. So you sit in a room for hours and you leave all of your personal belongings outside. It's a very grueling enterprise. And midway through, I got a migraine, right? So like half of my math test, I don't even remember, right? So it's a snapshot of your performance on a particular day. If you're someone that has a lot of anxiety around standardized test taking, you may want to plan to be able to take the test multiple times if you don't perform as well as you like the first time around. But it is, you know, a very I think not necessarily a reflection of your aptitude in any way. It's really a reflection of your ability to take a test and to prepare to take a test, and to have the time necessary to do the studying and to familiarize yourself with the process.
There are also guides to study for these tests. So if, you might want to pick one up, and if it's necessary, and you can start to look through it and see, practice questions, things like that. Anyone else want to add anything about exams? So we wanted to talk to you as well about one of the other big areas that you want to prepare for. It's not always the case that you'll need an interview, but you may. So what should you do to prepare for an interview? What does it entail? And what should you be doing? So I think this was going to be Dr. Zeller-Berkman. We're going to talk a little bit about preparing for an interview.
Sure. Forgive if you hear a crying baby, it's just because she wants to be down here with us talking about interviews. But anyway, I think if you have an opportunity to have an interview, it's a real gift. It's a way that you can have a space to go above and beyond the materials that you submitted in your application, and really share your accomplishments and your experiences, interests, personal values, goals in a deeper way. Really make what you put on paper come alive. And it's also a time and space where the committee can get a sense of you, your personality, your attitude, and I know we'll talk about fit in a little bit, but an interviewer walks away with a sense of you as a person and your fit for the program. So in our program, you'll generally be interfacing with one interviewer. In other programs, it may be that there's a panel, an admissions committee that you're talking to, and as you prepare, you can ask what the format might be, and who may be on a panel if you have it that way. I think regardless of the format, you're probably going to have a mixture of kind of specialized questions about your interest areas, and that'll be especially true if you're applying to PhD programs. They'll want to know what you're interested in researching and who you want to study with. But then you'll probably also need to be prepared to just kind of speak generally about your previous experience, some of your goals for your program, and kind of what you want this degree to do for you, what you want to give to the learning community, and what you want to get out of this learning community. In terms of preparation, as you're asked to say why you're interested in the program, obviously you have to do a ton of research and be able to speak knowledgeably about the program that you're wanting to be a part of. Once again, if you have particular faculty that you want to study with, you should have a sense of their body of work. But it's also, I think in some interviews, they want you to give a sense of, all that you've accomplished and can do, but maybe also, they might ask a question about like a time that you've failed and how you overcame that. People are interested nowadays in growth mindset and seeing how you move through hardship. So they may have asked about strengths, but want you to be reflective enough to also be able to talk about your weaknesses. And, in our program, we mainly use the interview as a space for people to address, for us, if we have a candidate that maybe didn't have a 3.0 on their transcript, but we're interested in them, it really provides us an opportunity to say, like, can you give us a little context, what was going on for you, but also like what supports have you put in place? Like, how can you let us know that you are prepared for master's level work? And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'll pass it over to any other people on the panel if you use interviews or have anything else to add.
So I'd like to just jump in on that and say that if you do have to go for an interview, it's really, really important to prepare for that. Take the time to sit with someone, whether it's a professional colleague or an entrusted faculty person that you've worked with, but you do need to sit and practice. Go through some prepared questions, come up with your answers of how you want to address the questions that are going to be posed. Be comfortable with the kinds of questions that may be asked during an interview so that you can be poised and that you can present yourself well. Don't underestimate the need for preparing for an interview and not just reading questions and writing out answers, but actually speaking about them and talking to them. Even if you're just doing it in front of a mirror, if you have nobody else that you can work with, it's really important to prepare.
And I just want to add that even if a program doesn't have a formal interview process, you may still want to reach out to faculty members that you want to work with. And if you do that, I would consider it an informal interview and I would prepare just as much. And the reason is that, especially for PhD programs, faculty members are often the ones who are admitting students. And so if you have somebody who wants you in the program, that's worth a whole lot, but you have to be prepared going in. And it makes sense, to contact somebody who you would want to work with or who can help you achieve your goals. So there has to be, a good reason to contact somebody. But if you can find a reason, I think it's a really good idea to reach out to a faculty member and talk to them, but be prepared.
Something else I wanted to add is that in psychology, if you apply to a PhD program, there's not only a faculty interview, there's also a student interview. So students from the PhD program will actually interview you as part of the process. And something to keep in mind is that the interview is not a buddy-buddy interview, that you're actually still being assessed, even though this person is a student. The person might be very relaxed in their approach to the conversation, but they are still paying attention to what kinds of questions you ask. And sometimes students have a vote when it comes to admissions. So for example, I've had interviews where the students were talking about work and talking about what they were interested in, and it was really fantastic. And we right away established that we were going to work with, what we could potentially work with this person if the person came to the program, and the person might be a really good fit for projects I was working on. But I've also had interviews when I was a graduate student where the person coming in, the applicant, was only interested in knowing about nightclubs in New York. And that obviously was a little bit problematic. And it was part of the decision process where as students, we had no choice but to tell faculty members, this person only asked us about nightlife in New York. The person asked us absolutely no questions about grad school. So keep in mind, every interview you have, every conversation you have with someone from the program that you're applying to is a formal conversation, and you should be professional.
And to top off what Isabel said, it's important to also have your questions as part of the interview process, because that's always a question that's going to be asked. Do you have any questions? So do your homework, prepare, know about the school, the programs, the faculty, some unique things about the institution. You want to be able to sound like you did some investigation, that you took the time. And so it shows that you are interested in the institution, the faculty, the program, and so forth. So do make sure that you take time to have a few questions that you can pose to the interviewers.
Yeah, to sort of piggyback what Dr. Alicia mentioned about every bit of conversations that you have with people, you should assume it's being shared. The same goes for correspondence. When you send emails, those should be professional emails. Dr. So-and-so, whatever your question is, sign off properly, proper subjects. All of that correspondence can be shared among the people in the program and across different departments or areas within the school as well. So just always, be putting your best foot forward. And if you do get an interview, my biggest piece of advice would be to be on time. Show up. As someone who's been serving on graduate committees, you think it goes without saying, but I have been stood up for interviews. It doesn't look it doesn't look favorably upon your application to stand up the admissions committee. If you're running a little late, just as you would in any professional setting, you need to notify someone. Anyone else want to add anything? So this leads us to our last area before we start to take your questions, which is sort of the ever elusive idea of fit that you've heard people mention. And so Dr. Barker is going to talk a little bit about fit, and others will chime in, but this is a very important part of the process. So why don't I turn it over to you, Dr. Barker?
Sure. So yes, fit is a very important part of the graduate school application process. It's something that is kind of elusive and not fully understood and maybe sometimes overlooked. Fit is definitely a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I did my dissertation research on one aspect of fit, and I'm interested in all things fit. So this was a great topic for me to talk about. So what does fit really mean? It's the suitability of one thing to another. It's making sure that it's a good match. So researchers have generally explored various types of fit, person job fit, person vocation fit, person group fit, person environment fit. But for the purpose of this panel, I'm going to be talking about two types of fit, and that's applicant institution fit and applicant program fit. So these are two important aspects for you to consider as you're doing your graduate school research, as well as when you're preparing your documents, such as your personal statement, your resume, and also when you're requesting recommendation letters. So I think it's important to, when you're considering fit, remember that no two graduate programs are alike. That, two graduate programs might have the same title, they might have the same degree, but the program's focus, the course sequencing, the curriculum, the professors, the school itself, they each make the degree unique, just like each of you are unique. So a high level of fit ensures alignment between the student, between the institution, between the program, and that all results in a very dynamic and very powerful relationship. So the two types of fit that I'd really like to discuss are, the first is applicant institution fit. And this is where you should really think about whether you and the school are a good match, you and the target school. Are you a good match for one another? Ask yourself questions like, why am I interested in pursuing a graduate degree at this particular school as opposed to another school? What makes this school unique? How can I thrive at this school? What are they offering to me, and what can I offer to them? It's kind of a reciprocal relationship there. It's definitely important for you to do your research. Do your due diligence. It's important for you to understand and appreciate what the school expects, what the school cares about, and what it really is seeking in applicants. You should thoroughly research and understand your target school's history, which many people don't really do. Go back and look into the history of the school. Look at the school's mission, the vision, the values, look at the culture. Of course, make sure you look at the admissions criteria. That's kind of a basic thing, but this all goes into the fit. Ask yourself questions like, do I share the school's values? Do I believe in its mission and vision? Can I support these things? And how can I really contribute to the success of the school as a graduate student? Another part of applicant institution fit is researching the size of the school, the makeup of the student body, looking into extracurricular groups and activities, what kind of events are being hosted, and also what kind of community partnership opportunities are there for you. along with research as well, you know, particularly at the PhD level, at the doctoral level, the research interests really come into play. It's very important that your identity as a graduate school student includes a sense of belonging and an opportunity to make contributions outside of the classroom, you know, and when you're thinking about fit, if you go into a school maybe for its prestige, you might find that in the end, you're not a good fit for that school and that school is not a good fit for you. And you might end up leaving halfway or not being happy, you know, so it's important to really identify how that fit, finding that fit balance between yourself and the institution. The second type of fit is applicant program fit. Okay, so when we're thinking about particular programs, we want to find programs that obviously fit your interests along with your academic and professional goals. You want to research each program's admission criteria, the mission of the program. Each program should have a mission on their website as well, in addition to the school's mission. The general focus of the program, the full curriculum, make sure you really dive into that curriculum. And think about how your knowledge, your skills, and your abilities, your core KSAs, your experience, your qualities, your professional, academic, and research interests really align with the program mission and the program focus. Make sure that the curriculum is in line with what you want to learn. You know, is there anything missing that you value that's important in your education? If there is, perhaps another program will offer those things to you. You might want to map out your ideal course sequence for each program. That might be an interesting way to really find out if it's a good fit. If you spend some time thinking about how each sequence addresses your interests, you'll soon see which program's curriculum is the best fit for you. And finally, considering how achieving your degree from a particular program will fit into your future. You know, think about how the program could help you to achieve your goals and your dreams. Research where the alumni from a program go on to work or study. And think about, will the program really help you to build a skill set or area of expertise that will give you a competitive advantage in your career? Remember that a lack of knowledge, general lack of knowledge about your target institution and the program can really negatively impact your application. You can have stellar grades, you can have great transcripts and letters of recommendation, and then we get to the personal statement and there's nothing about how your interest or experience aligns with the school and the program. And that's definitely an important piece to consider. You want to consider fit throughout every phase. Make sure that you clearly and authentically explain why you're a good fit, and for the school and the program with definite concrete examples, not just vague general responses. And you should avoid statements that reflect a generic approach to the application process, because this signals that you really haven't made an honest effort to learn about the school and the program. One last part about this is avoid statements that indicate that you, the target school, and the program are a perfect fit if you can't corroborate those statements with concrete evidence. Take the time to reflect on your experiences and incorporate them into your explanations of why you're a good fit. This is graduate school is a very big investment of your time, your effort, your money, and it's really crucial that you conduct your due diligence now to ensure that your selected school and the program are the best fit for you and that you are the best fit for the program, that reciprocal relationship once again. And the final thought I wanted to make is that, academic requirements and coursework and all of that are only one piece of the graduate school experience. Your goal is to really find a school and a program that will allow you to create a holistic experience throughout your graduate school journey that best fits your unique needs, characteristics, and aspirations. So I invite you and encourage you to explore your fit as you go through these, and feel free to email me with any questions. I'm happy to discuss fit with you all day long.
Others want to add anything?
I think Dr. Barker covered it all.
Yes, I know it was a bit lengthy. I apologize for that. I'm very passionate about fit.
That's great.
I think she did a wonderful job. I just wanted to double down on please look at the curriculum, because, so often, I receive an application and the admissions committee asked me to kind of have an interview with the person. And when I ask them, have you looked at the courses in the program? And they say no, then, it makes me think that they're not that interested in our program because they haven't taken the time to really look at the list of courses. Or sometimes, I'll get an application and in the statement, it will say that the person is interested in the program because they want to study something that clearly isn't one of our courses or anything that we would offer in a disability studies program. So that fit is really, really important. But I can't emphasize enough that please familiarize yourselves with the courses that are offered, because you want to make sure, the last thing we want is for students to have buyer's remorse, right? When they're in the program and then they go, oh, this wasn't what I wanted. So you really, really, need to do some research.
Great, thank you. So we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. I think it's probably best if we do this in the breakout rooms to give you time with people who are familiar with the programs that you're interested in. I do want to sort of remind you of the next event that we're going to be having, which is next Wednesday. It's the grad school application statement writing workshop. This is going to be a little bit panel, but a lot workshop. We really want you to learn how to write these statements. So we've talked about them and various people have alluded to their importance. And there are things that you want to avoid in a personal statement, and there are things that you really want to do in a personal statement. So next week, we'll talk about what should be happening in those statements. But for now, we're going to put you in breakout rooms, and you can talk to the leaders of your breakout rooms about anything that you want, including what admissions committees are looking for. And that may be different based on program. So again, I hope to see you next week. And thank you so much for joining us today. I won't see you again because you won't come back into this breakout room, but I hope that you enjoy your time with the breakout group leaders. Thank you, everyone.